Good afternoon, good morning, good evening for those of you joining from all over. My name is Rob Freed. I am the Executive Vice President of Forensics at Page One, and I'm very happy to be here today with you to discuss an important topic related to the use of AI and why your team's AI decisions matter. So, I'm going to go through a quick agenda, make a quick introduction, uh, talk about the shift to AI that we've experienced over the last few years, although AI has been around for a while, the decision chain in terms of what's involved when using it and how to apply it to your various matters or how you're using it in general. Talk about some regulatory expectations that are now being brought up by different agencies and different organizations. We'll talk about some preservation, collection, and reconstruction considerations, and then briefly some best practices with a QA that we could very well do through email, through my contact information, or through the chat as well. I encourage you to use the chat to ask any questions throughout the broadcast today. So a little bit about me. Again, Rob Freed, based out of New York, been in the industry over 2 decades now. It's going to be my 24th year this year. Have a master's and a bachelor's in forensic science from the University of New Haven, and have held leadership roles for several different multinational organizations and professional services, mostly related to e-discovery. I also trained law enforcement for a number of years at the National White Collar Crime Center, NW3C. I maintain numerous digital forensic certifications related to tools and processes and things like that. Licensed private investigator in New York, Michigan, and South Carolina currently, and the author of a number of books, now five, titled Forensic Data Collections 2.0, available on Amazon and other online retailers. So we're going to talk about the shift to artificial intelligence. It's really become a main part of many of our lives in terms of when we are using Google, doing Google searches, we're asking it questions, and now we're getting back, information either from Gemini or Copilot or whatever model that you use. And as we all know, it's highly capable of doing a lot of things for us related to automating processes that normally took us a lot of time and a lot of effort. And now we're able to leverage this technology to save time and money, which is a win-win if you think about it. So like I said, it's able to automate a lot of things that we would normally have had to have done manually, saving hours and hours of and potentially days and longer of time. It responds to our questions, right? And it's able to kind of give us information related to what we're asking, what our queries are, but it can also summarize large volumes of data. Can look at the sentiment that may be contained in there and, offer recommendations. So for example, I use Notebook LM from Google, and I put a lot of my own content in there, and that gives me the ability to provide summaries and do some other things with it that normally I would have had to have done a lot of research into things and my materials to kind of get a specific aspect answered. So I use it fairly regularly, and it's a great asset and time saver for me. But wait, there's more. So AI can also do the following. So it can help us, but it can also hallucinate, fabricate information, provide biases, and then make recommendations. And in all of that, we have to remember that although we have a way to help us extract information, be able to look at information from a number of different standpoints, you always want to incorporate the human element, right? There's always a human behind the keyboard, behind the device, speaking to it, typing into it, and whatnot. And I equate this in my world of forensic science as kind of like the use of AI, which was a fingerprint, AFIS, which is the automated uh, identification fingerprinting system. And with that particular solution, an examiner can look at a number of fingerprints and be able to see whether or not they match in terms of minutia. And then once you kind of get what you think is a potential match based on what the system is giving you, the human element of it comes in because the examiner then has to look at that with their own eyes and based on their own experience and make a judgment as to whether or not those fingerprints are truly a match. So there should always be a human element involved in any of those processes. So why the human element is because we have to remember AI is not a human. It doesn't have a law degree. It doesn't have a PI license. It could blindly guide us, right? And so we want to make sure that we are kind of looking at the recommendation and looking at a standpoint of like, what is it telling us and how is it getting to that point, right? What queries are you asking? Essentially, all the things that go into AI coming back with a response is almost like a black box to us in reality. So we have to be prepared to be challenged. And it could be very difficult to defend information that you've obtained from an AI model if you're not taking the proper steps. So the reality is, like anything automated, if you cannot defend it, you shouldn't rely on it. So when you're choosing to use AI to run important queries related to the work that you do, the cases that you're on, the cases that you're investigating, it's very important that you show how those decisions that you've made in using AI as well came about. So there's a decision train essentially that's involved here, right? When we're using AI, we input some information through prompting or querying. We then allow the AI model to process that information, and it behaves in a certain way, gathers that based on the information that it has available to it. It then will output its recommendation, and that could either be in a text response, could be in an audio response, could be based on what you prompted, a document or some kind of other file format. And at the end of the day, we choose what we want to do with that information. And that could be the output that we'll use for something that we're going to share with a wider audience. Perhaps, we're gathering information for our own personal use. But in any case, the human interaction takes place where we evaluate what we get back and next steps, how we're going to use it. In terms of how things are starting to be regulated as people are using these AI outputs that they're getting. It's extremely important that we pay attention to preserving the information that's part of our usage and output, the whole thing. And it's ideal for you to kind of document so that if you get questioned, at least people see the steps that you took, the overall process, and so you can always retrace your steps. Maintaining meticulous documentation is critical here. And I always say, no documentation equals no evidence. If you don't document, it never happened. So it's really important to also take note of the industry that you're in. You may be in a specific industry that requires you to maintain records for a certain period of time, and you need to comply with that. So if this is part of your decision-making process in terms of using AI, you definitely want to start taking a look at the information that you're gathering and how you're storing it and how you're mentioning its usage, etc. This is important in several different industries. I'm highlighting one here from the US FDA. Some guidance was generated in January 2025, which shared some consideration for the use of AI and to support regulatory decision making for drug and biological products. So they had this document readily available that you could download and read through. And what's really interesting about it is the FDA is taking a forward-thinking approach of being able to present their current view on the subject and the use of AI. And what they're saying should be seen as recommendations. And so, you look at some of the documentation, it talks about the consideration, the risks, things like that. But, if the government agencies are starting to get involved with this, technology, because they know people are using it, they know information is being gathered, it's very important for us to all kind of be aligned and be consistent in understanding, what it can do, how it can be used, and if you are going to use it for a case, involving a product or litigation or investigation, how those agencies or organizations are dealing with it is extremely important to take note of. In terms of preserving, collecting, and reconstructing, we want to preserve and document everything. Your AI interactions should really be treated like digital evidence, because you're putting information in and getting information out, and that information that you're receiving is very specific for that moment in time. And so every AI model essentially has its own version, just like software that we use, and it's certainly configured based on your subscription. Some people have free, other people have paid subscriptions. It gives you the ability to have access to faster interactions, maybe more usage during a day. You can change, features like voices or things like that. And also, we have to take into consideration when you're interacting with these particular models, you're prompting the model. So you're using, and prompt metadata comes into play, which describes and involves and associated with the intended task that you're asking the model to perform, the audience, the language being used, and the format. So if I'm going to say, hey, I need to create a presentation for Quick Bites to the legal, investigatory, and digital forensic communities today in English, and please make it in slide deck format, that metadata is very specific. And if I was to look to see where that information gets stored, it could be stored in my browser cache, depending on how I'm connecting with it. My application may have some cache data as well, session tokens for that particular period that I'm using it, cloud, obviously, being able to go back to that model and look at conversations I've had with it or chats that I've had with it in the past. That can certainly be stored up in the cloud. And then locally, where things are stored on the computer itself, there may be some output files that are downloaded. Where's that download activity on the local device? The activity that you're doing within the model itself may be stored within the model's cloud service, but it could also have information in, let's say, the user settings or the business enterprise level settings for a particular organization. So it just really depends on a number of those factors of where this information can be gathered from. And like I said, reconstruction can be important because you have to show the steps that got you to how that decision was made, and how you wound up potentially using it. So the AI models, because things are fairly dynamic here, may give different answers to the same query just because information's constantly changing there. And so that moment in time, the best way to essentially document it, and you can hear I'm not saying snapshot it, because you don't want to just take screenshots per se. There may be additional metadata and information that you want to preserve. Sure, you want to gather the information that you're inputting and getting outputs for, but there's other information to take note of. And so you want to reconstruct essentially that environment that you use. Take note of the model and the version. Okay, look at the data that you're inputting in. Maybe you're uploading information. When I'm using Notebook LM, I'm uploading some of my book content, maybe some slideshows that I've done. And then what's the kind of next step of, once you do that, trying to have the model run the tasks that you intended to perform. So that prompt metadata is extremely important. That moment in time may be different, obviously, give you different results than down the road. And so that's the best way to preserve it. Take note of all that you're using, all that you're receiving back, and making sure that you're preserving that accordingly. Some best practices. We have to really think about how organizations are allowing and addressing, I should say addressing and or allowing or disallowing the use of AI. I myself, teach at the academic level, and at the university where I teach, there's a whole use of AI section, and it's at the discretion of the instructor. There may be times where you want to use it, where you don't want to use it. And that's just at the academic level. Corporations need to be thinking the same. If you have a policy that is open-ended and doesn't restrict usage, people can go and use these free models that are available and use it. And then you may have some hallucinations that may not be caught by either the person using the engine or the model, and or other people that look at the data. Remember, we're in a very fast-paced world these days, and so you want to take a step back and you want to say, do we have a governance policy in place, a usage policy? What AI model can be used or shouldn't be used? Who are the authorizing parties associated with this policy? And are there specific things that you can and can't do? The recommended usage is really important, and if you are going to allow it, perhaps establish at the enterprise level the specific AI model that's approved. and have a training program associated with that, because that AI model, may need to be kind of understood in terms of what its potential is, but also what its limitations and what the drawbacks of its usage are. And so the idea of using AI to help you accelerate the work that you do, the decisions that you make, is something that should be embraced, right? We should all look at the technology and see good in it, and see all the benefits. But you have to, especially in leveraging it for legal purposes, for investigations, for things like that are going to go forward into a court of law, you want to establish policies and procedures to document the usage, to understand the limitations, the drawbacks, so that you can, as an organization, defend it. Also, as an individual, be able to defend it. If I'm using it, I always look at the output and decide whether or not this is something that is in line with how I would say something, even if I'm using Notebook LM, which I base solely on my own content. I'm still looking at it and making that judgment call on whether or not that's acceptable to use or not. So we'll leave it open for a couple of minutes here of questions. My personal email address is rfried@pageonelegal.com to reach me at the Page One team. And then you also have on the top right my LinkedIn profile to connect up with me, and we can kind of share our posts and information with our respective networks. So thank you for the opportunity to present and participate in this quick bites session. I look forward to interacting with you in the near future. Let's see if we have any questions. Okay, I don't see any current questions. Let me just make sure that is the case. Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time today, and let's connect soon. Have a great day, and we'll be in touch.